Hey, class, welcome back. And we are still talking about World War II today, and we're talking about the Fireside Chats that FDR did to the public just about each week. He had about 30 or something through his presidency. But yeah, he did actually started them whenever he took over as president during the Great Depression. But he also did some during World War II today, and that's what we're going to be talking about. His Fireside Chats, what they were about. Were they really at a fireside? No, they were not, but how it got its name and all that. So that's what we're talking about today. Fireside Chats. All right. So when he became president, Franklin D. Roosevelt became president, he wanted to be able to talk to the public. He wanted to communicate to them his ideas or the ideas of what's going on around the country to the public. So he did this through radio speeches that were called Fireside Chats. Uh, he would address whatever issue was going on in the country at the time, and he used these speeches to encourage the American people during the times of trouble.
What were the Fireside Chats? When Franklin D. Roosevelt became president, he wanted a way to communicate his ideas directly to the American people. He did this through a number of radio speeches called Fireside Chats. He would address issues and explain what was going on in the country. He used these speeches to encourage the American people during the times of trouble.
All right. So where'd the name Fireside Chats come from? Well, they came from a reporter named Harry Butcher. And he first called the speeches the Fireside Chats because many Americans listen to the speeches in their living room near their fireplaces. And because President Roosevelt, when he talked to them, he didn't talk to them talk to the people in a formal manner. He talked to them like I would talk to you in class. All right. Like like we're just having a conversation with each other. And that's where the name got it. That's where they got the name Fireside Chats from. He wasn't actually at fireside or sitting fireside giving a speech. No, he was in his office. But it was broadcast over the radio, and people actually loved these broadcasts. It was very popular.
Where did the name come from? From the name of these speeches, you might at first think that President Roosevelt was sitting by a cozy fire telling stories, but he actually sat at his desk talking into a microphone. The name Fireside Chats came from a reporter named Harry Butcher. He first called the speeches Fireside Chats because, one, many Americans listened to the speeches in their living room near their fireplaces, and two, President Roosevelt talked in an informal manner as if he were chatting with a friend rather than giving a speech.
This is Harry Butcher right here. All right. So what were these chats about? Well, they're about a little bit about everything. All right. What was going on currently during the time? He first entered office, the country was in an economic crisis, and his very first one was about banking. All right, what they were going to do with the banks and how they were going to shut down the banks, have a bank holiday, and he discussed ideas such as a New Deal program, then too, drought conditions, unemployment, and during World War II, he talked about the war and what people of America could do to help. So there were a number of different things that these chats were about.
What were the chats about? Chats were about the current issues of the day. When President Roosevelt first entered the office, the country was in an economic crisis called the Great Depression. He discussed issues such as his New Deal program, drought conditions, and unemployment. Later during World War II, he talked about the war and what the people of America could do to help.
All right. Yes, these chats were very popular with the public at the time. The radio was one of the main sources of news and information of the day. During this time, they didn't have television quite yet, I don't believe. But the family would gather around the radio, listen to different radio shows, and the Fireside Chats were one of the most listened to radio events of the time. So they were very popular.
Were the chats popular? Yes, the Fireside Chats were very popular. The radio was one of the main sources of news and information of the day. The family would often gather around the radio and listen to different radio shows. Fireside Chats were one of the most listened to radio events of the time.
All right, the first Fireside Chat was held on March 12th, 1933, and it was just a few days after he had been elected or started his first term in office. He talked about the banking crisis at the time during his first chat and what was going on, and he explained how banks work, and he explained what the government was going to do to fix the problem, which is what they did. They did a bank holiday, And then they came up with the FDIC to ensure, so the banks, when they opened back up, would have their money insured by the federal treasury. So, and he asked the American people, not the public, but this was his very first fireside chat, was about banking.
The first Fireside Chat. The first Fireside Chat was held on March 12, 1933. This was just a few days after President Roosevelt started his first term in office. He talked about a banking crisis that was going on at the time. He explained how banks worked and what was going wrong. He also explained what the government was going to do to fix the problem. He then asked the American people not to panic.
All right. So a lot of these early fireside chats had to do with the economy and the Great Depression. And he also talked about unemployment, the New Deal, the drought in the Midwest that was going on that we talked about when we talked about the Great Depression. And he tried to explain it to people so they would understand what was going on throughout the country. You know, but it was really informal. It was like me and you, or like you and your friend were having a conversation. The way he did things.
The Great Depression. Many of the early fireside chats had to do with the economy and the Great Depression. The president talked about unemployment, the New Deal, the drought in the Midwest, the U.S. currency, and more. He tried to explain it to people so they would understand what was going on throughout the country and what the government was doing to try to make things better.
All right. So when World War II began on December 9th, 1941, the president told the American people, hey, the country is going to be joining the Allies and going to war against Germany and Japan. This was after Pearl Harbor was attacked. He talked about it before then, about war, or the subject of war. But on December 9th, 1941, that's when he gave one of his fireside chats and talked about the countries joining the Allies and joining the war. And later on in some of these, he would outline the progress of the war. He asked families to listen to these chats in rooms so they could locate where these American troops were being sent and were fighting. And he wanted the American public, you know, when they went back to work, to build planes, weapons, tanks, ships to help win the war.
World War II. When World War II began, the fireside chats turned to the subject of war. On December 9th, 1941, the president told the American people that the country was joining the Allies and going to war against Germany and Japan. Later, he would outline the progress of the war. He asked families to listen to the chats with a world map in the rooms so they could locate where American troops were fighting. He asked the American people to work hard to build planes, weapons, tanks, and ships to help win the war.
All right, comprehension questions. What were the fireside chats? Were they A, speeches given by Franklin D. Roosevelt, B, campfires, or C, nothing? They were A, speeches given from the Great Depression through World War II by Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number 2, who gave it the name Fireside Chats? Was it A, Dan Rather, B, Harry Butcher, or C, Walter Cronkite? It was B, Harry Butcher. He was a reporter at the time.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
Number 3, what did President Roosevelt talk about? A, current issues of the day, B, his wife, or C, football? He talked about the current issues of the day, what was going on at that time in the country.
Ding, ding, ding.
And around the world.
We have a winner.
Number 4, when was the first fireside chat? A, 1933, B, 1999, or C, 2021? It was A, 1933 was the very first one, and he talked about banking and what the country was going to do to fix the banking crisis.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
And that is all for the fireside chats. I'll see you back next time. We will be talking about the Holocaust and what impact and everything it had on it. It's a horrible, horrible time in human history. You all have a good day. I'll see you next time.